morning back to class, or afternoon, or the evening, whatever time of day you start to listen to this. I'm now going to read you another one of our short stories, and this one is called The Ugly Old Toad. I wonder, have you ever seen a toad before? Do you know the difference between a toad or a frog? It'd be interesting if you can tell me. The Ugly Old Toad. Once upon a time, a big old toad wanted to cross the road to get to a pond he knew on the other side. He couldn't jump high and quickly like his cousins, the frog. He could only do small hops or crawl, but he set off valiantly, which means he gave it a really good effort, even though he wasn't as good as his cousins, the frogs, hoping to get across the road before anything came along. Anything like what? Cars, cycles. Quite dangerous for a toad to cross the road. Quite dangerous for us to cross the road. But think how big it is for a toad. He was almost across when a horse and cart came down the lane. Clippity-clop went the horse's hooves, and the old toad heard them. He tried to hop away quickly, but one of the horse's hooves trod on his back leg. Oh no! Almost at once the horse lifted up his hoof again and went on, not even knowing that he had crushed the foot off the toad. Not the foot off the toad, sorry, I said that wrong. He crushed the foot of the toad. So his foot isn't off, he hasn't decapitated it or cut it off. It's just he's landed on the foot of the toad. Just making that clear. Oh, groaned the toad to himself, crawling to the side of the road, dragging his hurt foot behind him. What a bit of bad luck! I can hardly walk now. How my foot is hurting me. He was in so much pain that he could not go any further. He squatted by the side of the road, hoping that his foot would soon get better, but it didn't. He tried again to crawl, but his foot hurt him too much, so he lay there, half hidden by the tuft of grass, hoping that no enemies would come by. I wonder why he's hoping that no enemies will come by. What do you think? Would he be easily run away? No, he couldn't, could he? He would be an easy meal right now for a big bird or something. So hopefully he's got to stay hidden under that tuft of grass. The big rat ran by and stopped when he saw the toad. Aha! Dinner for me, thought the rat, knowing that the toad was hurt. He ran up to the toad and snapped at him. The toad still could not crawl away, but he had a good trick to play on the rat. He oozed out an evil-smelling, horrible-tasting liquid all over his back. When the rat tried to bite him, he got his mouth full of this nasty stuff. Ugh, horrible, said the rat, and stood staring at the toad with his mouth open, trying to let the nasty-tasting stuff drip away out of his mouth. Horrible! I wouldn't have you for my dinner for anything. And he ran off, and the toad sat still, glad to be rid of him. Then he heard footsteps coming down the lane, and he shrank back into the grass, trying to look like a brown clod of mud. He really did not look like one, though. Soon a boy came up to him, whistling. He almost trod on the toad, but he did not see him and went on whistling. He thought the old toad was just a lump of earth. Bonus, that's what he was hoping for. He stayed really still, hoping his foot would stop hurting, for the horse's hoof had been hard and heavy, and it was a wonder if it had not cut the toad's foot right off. Bit of a mouthful for me, sorry, couldn't get that out in one sentence. Then the toad heard more footsteps. Who do you think it's this time? These footsteps were lighter ones this time. So this time he crouched down again. But the passer-by was a sharper eyed than the boy, and this time they saw him. Ooh, a toad, said a voice. And the toad looked up cautiously. This time he saw a little girl gazing down at him. She wrinkled her nose in disgust. Can you wrinkle your nose? Ew. Nasty creatures, toads. I can't bear toads. Ugly things with your pimply backs and your creepy crawly ways. I don't like you one little bit. The toad crouched very still. He was afraid. This little girl might stamp on him if she didn't like him that much. Children were sometimes very cruel to creatures like him. But he couldn't help being an ugly old toad. He was born like that. However, the little girl did not stamp on him. She wasn't cruel. She did think the toad was ugly, and she didn't like him very much, but she wasn't going to be unkind. I don't like ugly creatures, she said to the toad. I couldn't bear to touch you. Ooh, that would be horrid. It would make me feel ill. The toad was sad. He wished he had been born a butterfly or a bird. Then perhaps the little girl would have liked him. But you had to be what you were born to be. There wasn't any help for that. And then suddenly, the little girl saw the toad's foot. It was all crushed and flattened. She stared at it in horror. Toad, your foot is squashed to bits. Is it hurting you? Or how did it happen? Did someone tread on you? The toad still crouched flat. He knew the little girl wouldn't tread on him now, but he was still very afraid. She looked at him, sad because of his foot. I can't leave you here like this, she said. I'm sorry I said all those unkind things now. I didn't know you were hurt. I think I'd better take you home to my mother. She'll know exactly what to do for your foot. The toad didn't want to be taken home. He wanted to be left alone in peace. The little girl was wondering how to carry him. Remember, she doesn't want to touch him. She doesn't like toads. Although I'm very sorry for you, I simply can't touch you, she said. I can't. I should drop you if I touched you, you see. I just don't like the feel of toads. Then she thought of using her handkerchief. Handkerchief is a funny word. Handkerchief is probably a word that you probably don't even understand either. When I was little, which was a long, long time ago, I used to go to school with my school uniform, a school bag, and in my pocket I always had a handkerchief. So if I had a runny nose, a tiny little square piece of cloth. Obviously today we use tissues and we dispose of them straight away in the bin because handkerchiefs hold all that dirtiness. They're quite unhygienic really. You blow your nose, you put it back in your pocket, you get it back out again, you blow your nose. So constantly you're putting a wet snotty rag in your pocket. Ugh. Anyway, the little girl's got a handkerchief, so she thought, I know, I could wrap him up in my handkerchief. That could work. She would wrap the toad in it and carry him back to her house. She would hold all four corners of the hanky. Then she would not need to touch him at all. See? Good thinking. So to the toad's surprise and fright, she dropped a hanky over him, rolled him gently into it, and picked him up in the hanky. She carried him by taking hold of the four corners, but she didn't even like doing that. She took him home. The toad did not wriggle or struggle because it hurt his foot far too much. He just lay in the hanky, very miserable, wondering what was going to happen to him. The little girl went into her gate. She called to her mother. Mummy, I've got a hurt toad. Can you do something for him, please? Her mother was very surprised. She undid the hanky and took the toad in her bare hands. She didn't mind touching any creatures. She saw the hurt foot and was sorry. I can't do much, she said. I will just bathe his foot and with very weak iodine, but it's no good binding it up. The best thing you can do for him, Jenny, is to put him in a cool, shady corner of the garden, somewhere where there are plenty of flies for him to catch, and leave him to himself. Maybe the foot will heal itself. I don't like him much, said Jenny. He can't help being a toad, said her mother. You might have been born a toad, and think how you would feel if people treated you that way. That's not fair, is it, Jenny? No, it isn't, said Jenny. She looked down at the toad, and he looked at her. She saw his eyes. Mummy, he's got the most beautiful eyes, she said, surprised. Do look at them. They're like jewels in his little head, and he's gleaming as bright as copper. Oh, his eyes really are so beautiful. All toads do have lovely eyes, said Mother. They are nice creatures, Jenny, and they make really good pets. Oh no, Mummy, said Jenny, astonished. I have never heard of a toad as a pet before. There are quite a lot of things you haven't heard before, said Jenny's mother. Now I've finished bathing his foot. Do you think you could possibly bring yourself to carry him into your hands to a nice bit of the garden? Or do you dislike this toad so much? Jenny felt a little bit ashamed. She looked down at the toad. His coppery eyes were still gleaming and still beautiful, looking very kindly at her. He looked patient and he looked really wise. "I'll carry him," she said, and she picked him up in her hands very gently. He kept quite still. Jenny took him down to the garden and put him in the cool hedge behind her father's lettuces. "There you are," she said. "Stay there and catch flies. I don't know what else you can eat, but there are heaps of flies here for you." There were lots of flies. The toad heard a big one buzzing just over his head. He looked at it, and then, quick as a flash, he shot out a long, sticky tongue, caught the fly on the tip of it and swallowed and looked at Jenny. "A good meal," he seemed to say. Jenny laughed. "You're rather nice," she said, and left him. She forgot all about him. A week went by, then 2 weeks. Then Daddy came in one evening, bringing 2 delicious lettuces for supper. "Good gracious," said Jenny's mother, pleased. "I thought you told me that all the lettuces had been eaten by slugs. What beauties these are!" "Ah, I've got someone to guard my lettuces for me," said Father, "and a very good fellow he is too. He never allows a single slug on my lettuce bed now." "Who is he?" said Jenny, puzzled. "He's a toad," said her father. "A wise, friendly, kind old toad. He lives in the hedge behind my kitchen garden, and he keeps guard over all my lettuces. See how well they've grown since the old toad looked after them for me." "Daddy, he must be my toad. I forgot all about him," said Jenny, excited. "Your toad? I thought you didn't like toads," said her father. "What do you mean?" Jenny told him. "And we shall know if it is my toad by his foot," she said. Has he got a mended foot, Daddy? Has he got a mended foot, Daddy? Sorry, I really didn't read that correctly. Let me look and read again. Jenny told him, "And we shall know if it is my toad by his foot," she said. "Has he got a mended foot, Daddy?" "I didn't notice," said her father. "Let's go and see." So they went to see. And there was the old toad, and behind him was his hurt foot still, mended and healed. Now, but rather a funny shape. "It is my toad," said Jenny. "Look, he's crawling to me. Daddy, he knows I'm the little girl who brought him home." "Tickle his back with the grass," said Father. "He'll like that." So Jenny did, and the toad liked it very much. He tried to scratch his back with one of his foot, and it made Jenny laugh. "You're a good old toad," she said. "I do rather like you, and you shall make a very good pet." He is her pet, and he still keeps guard over the kitchen garden. I know, because I've been there to see him. What a nice story. So a little girl who once did not like toads, did not like the feel, the look of them, has then embraced how beautiful a creature they are, and actually what good quality they have. They do like flies. And so she benefited with the lovely big lettuces that Daddy was growing in his garden. I hope you like the story. Remember to comment. Tell me if you do, tell me if you don't, because the next story is all about a squirrel. I've got a squirrel. I've actually got 3 squirrels that visit my garden. I'll see if I can get some video footage and upload it and show you. So our next story is called Sly the Squirrel Gets a Shock. I wonder what the shock will be. Make a prediction, have a little idea, think about what the shock might be for the squirrel, and next time I read, you'll see if your prediction's correct.